It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. A report prepared by Republican staff of the Financial Services Committee was released on Monday stating that Eric Holder, the former Attorney General, ignored recommendations of the Justice Department prosecutors to charge the UK-based HSBC bank for money laundering. The report states that Department of Justice officials thought prosecuting the bank could result in global financial disaster. It is also being reported that UK Chancellor George Osborne was also implicated in preventing a prosecution against HSBC. Now, HSBC was accused of being used by drug cartels to launder money. They also engage in financial transactions with countries under sanction by the US, like Iran, Libya, and Cuba. To discuss all of this, I'm being joined by Bill Black. Bill is an associate professor of economics and law at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. He's a white-collar criminologist and former financial regulator, and author of The Best Way to Rob a Bank is to Own One. Thank you for joining us, Bill.
Thank you.
So, Bill, tell us about the gravity of this issue, Holder ignoring the recommendations of his own department prosecutors.
So there are two stories in this. One is that, the substance, and the second is the rather curious moves of the Republicans in Congress about all of this. Substantively, HSBC was one of the two or three largest banks in the world at the time it was doing this. It laundered money for at least a decade. It did so primarily in Mexico for the Sinaloa cartel, and it did so to the tune of at least $1 billion. HSBC's Mexican operations were so much part of the criminal enterprise, so much part of the Sinaloa cartel, that the cartel actually built specialized boxes to transfer the cash that exactly fit the teller cages in your things like your drive-up windows and such, right? So this was something where hundreds of HSBC officials knew that this was going on. It was a principal part of the operations of HSBC in Mexico. And as you say, on top of that, if you wanted to come back to the Republicans for a moment, if you wanted to really play this up, you'd say, hey, HSBC is providing funds to Libya, to Iran. It is supporting terrorism, it is supporting the creation, allegedly, of nuclear weapons, et cetera, right? It would be a really good issue for the Republicans. And, guess who was Secretary of State during much of this time? Substantively as well, there's a wonderful scandal in all of this. And the wonderful scandal, from the standpoint of the Republicans, is the Democrats were in power. And Eric Holder, despite recommendations from the professional prosecutors, and despite the fact that HSBC, these are not alleged facts, HSBC has admitted these facts, right? Despite this, one of the largest drug laundering operations in world history, one of the longest drug operations, money laundering operations in world history, Holder refused to prosecute. And he claimed that there was no basis for prosecuting. Now, that never made any sense, as I said, because it's kind of a problem for that HSBC is, in fact, admitting all the elements of the felony. And supposedly no one could be prosecuted, even though they admit the facts. But Holder kept secret the fact that he had reversed the recommendation of the professionals.
How did he keep that secret?
Well, the Republicans alleged by lying in his congressional testimony about the HSBC settlement. So let me go briefly to the weirdness from the Republican side, right? So the Republicans have been trying desperately to find something to attack Obama with forever. And they've been really desiring something that attacks Obama and potentially Hillary Clinton for obvious reasons. And this is a perfect one, right? It's got all the elements helping people launder for the Mexican cartel with all the, the Trumpy stuff about Mexico. It's got terrorism. It's got nuclear weapons. It's got Iran. You say the words Libya. These are all the things the Republicans theoretically would want to say. But they have been silent on the failure to prosecute, overwhelmingly. There are few exceptions, Grassley in a committee. Notice also, as you correctly said, that this is a leaked report to the Wall Street Journal. Well, that's no surprise. That happens all the time. But from the Republican staff only. Now, if you're a wonk, you know that the really great congressional stuff on the run-up to this crisis was done by Senator Levin. And it was done by Senator Levin with different Republican counterparts, but always jointly. And they produced joint reports. And those, of course, have far more credibility than a leaked report that is only from one side of the staff. So this, again, is the Republicans are unwilling to work with the Democrats, but also, if they tried, they got no one willing to go with them on the Democratic side. HSBC, on top of that, is the case that was handled by Loretta Lynch's office. And of course, she's now Eric Holder's successor. And not only should HSBC have been prosecuted, and as these documents show, and by the way,
didn't she
documents,
actually assist HSBC in this case?
Well, a different attorney at the Office of Foreign Asset Control. Now, those are the sanction people, right? And you talked about the sanctions. And those sanctions are against funding for groups that we believe to be terrorists. And with regard to Iran, it was funding that we thought could lead to the development of nuclear weapon. Again, those are, if you're from a Republican standpoint, that's ideal kind of stuff, right? So the Office of Foreign Asset Control attorney, they have documents because they being Congress, this is the House Financial Services Committee, and more precisely, it's the majority, which is to say the Republicans. Jeb Hensarling is the chairman. They have those documents because they subpoenaed them from the Treasury Department, and the Treasury Department complied with the subpoena. The Justice Department refused to comply with the subpoena. So again, in Republican politics, this is great, right? A cover-up by the Department of Justice of a cover-up. Meanwhile, you get some of the key facts from Treasury, and they show that this Office of Foreign Asset Control person, who you would normally expect to be a hawk on anything involving sanctions, is actually fighting against bringing a criminal prosecution. And shortly after that, she leaves the government, and I know it will shock you, but she ends up working for HSBC. On top of that, as you said, you have all the folks at Treasury being implored by Osborne, who was the British equivalent of the Secretary of the Treasury and the number 2 guy in power in the Tory party as well, saying you must not prosecute HSBC because it's too big to prosecute. It will cause devastating harm to the world economy. Now, that's complete BS. Obviously, what can cause harm to the global economy is having one of the largest banks in the world be a criminal enterprise that is working hand in glove with one of the largest drug cartels in the world and with the Libyan folks and the Iranian folks to avoid sanctions, right? That would be how you would screw up the world, not removing the crooks from HSBC. Well, what did the Justice Department do after Holder killed the prosecution? They did one of these, non-prosecution, allegedly deferred prosecution agreements. But except, deferred means never. It's one of those stupid euphemisms. And we know that because as part of these agreements, you get a monitor. And that monitor reported that HSBC was not fully complying. And Loretta Lynch and her successors have refused to prosecute even with that. And on top of that, the Panama disclosures and other disclosures showed that HSBC was engaged in massive violations, again, basically money laundering type activities to help the wealthiest folks in many countries. HSBC operates globally. Escape and evade taxes that they owe. So they're at least three-time losers, liars, after this settlement, where supposedly because of their extraordinary cooperation, some cooperation, right? After a decade of massive frauds, and they're caught red-handed, they supposedly cooperate. Well, we've now seen that they haven't. Under the deferred prosecution agreements, we could have used their admissions against them, prosecuted them much more easily, and the Justice Department has continued to refuse. And all those claims that Holder testified that he thought that some banks were too big to prosecute. And then he walked that back within a couple of days because he got such severe criticism. Well, now it comes out that's exactly what's been going on. That they view these as too big to jail, and that it's not just here in the United States, that they work with the City of London. And of course, where are the two biggest financial centers in the world? And it ain't close. They would be Wall Street and the City of London. And that's why we have this ability to rig the system to get incredibly wealthy as CEOs of these banks with complete impunity from criminal laws. So now the question is, what are the Republicans going to do with this? And what are the Democrats going to do with this? It's the perfect Republican issue, but of course it's embarrassing to a whole lot of Republican supporters in terms of the massive banks who are major political contributors both to Hillary and to the Republican Party traditionally. So are we going to get more of this sort of conspiracy of silence, or are the Republicans actually going to try to make this a major issue?
Now, Bill, one quick question for you. Didn't this come up in Loretta Lynch's confirmation hearings?
Some of it came up, but not very hard. Again, the clear thing is, as opposed to all kinds of other congressional investigations, which have had no merit to very little merit and little ability to embarrass Obama. This is the perfect one for embarrassing Obama. And it's a good one for embarrassing Hillary Clinton. It is a wonderful one for embarrassing the Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, who they are going after because of her decision not to prosecute and because of her unfortunate meeting with Bill Clinton, right? So it's the great Republican issue. They should be screaming about it with all of their surrogates every day. They should be demanding an investigation, and they control Congress. They have subpoena authority. They could be going after, and if the Democrats obstructed those investigations, the Democrats would pay heavily. But they haven't ever gone, not only have the Republicans not gone full force, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is about 0.0001 historically that the Republicans have been willing to complain about the Democrats' failure to prosecute the banksters. We'll see.
We'll wait and see, and the Republicans should give you a fee for this report. I thank you so much for joining us today, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.